discovery challenge. While I paint, see if you can spot 3 hidden details: scattered butterflies, flying embers, and tiny background flowers. And there are even more tiny details scattered around the Maximalist scene. Butterflies in different shapes drift across the red wall, tiny background flowers quietly fill the blue section, and little glowing embers rise from the bonfire painted on the pottery. Now here are 3 questions for you. How far can one bouquet of purple irises expand into an entire maximalist world? What kind of cozy object, curious creatures, and strange little collections live around these flowers? And what if one tiny detail inside the painting suddenly escaped into the real world? You can also find the 16:9 wallpaper and coloring line art on my coffee. Okay, let's start with the flowers. I started with very pale purple and honestly just tried to place the flowers first. At this stage, I'm not really worried about perfect petals. I'm thinking more about where each iris sits, which flower comes forward, which one stays behind, and how the whole bouquet moves across the composition. I think I used 2 or 3 layers just to build these basic shapes. And then I started bringing in darker purple, almost black in some areas, yellow, softer lavender, and even a little grey. This is where the flowers slowly begin to open up visually. I really like irises because every petal seems to curl in a slightly different direction. Some petals fold inward, some stretch outward, some almost twist around another flower. So instead of trying to make them all look neat and consistent, I used smudging to follow the direction of each petal. And I wanted them to feel alive. Not like a perfectly arranged bouquet that nobody is allowed to touch, more like the flowers are actively blooming and crowding into one another. The bright yellow against the deep purple also gives me that really strong contrast I wanted for this painting. And you can already see that I left a little space beside the bouquet. That pointed shape there, that's an ear. So of course I added a cat. I mean, if there's a huge bouquet sitting in front of the cat, I really don't think the cat is going to politely ignore it. This little white cat is already pushed right into the irises. Half of his face is hidden behind the petals, but I wanted that one visible eye to do most of the storytelling. Looks watchful, curious, maybe slightly suspicious. I kept the fur quite simple, didn't want to build every individual strand of hair because the irises already have so much movement and details. So I mostly use soft grey areas to suggest light and shadow across the white fur. And I like that balance. The flowers are expressive and dramatic while the cat is visually quieter. But because of that eye, you still notice it. And behind the bouquet, I wanted something decorative with more visual weight. So I started building this copper-colored candle holder. It has 3 candles, almost like a 3-pronged shape, and here I deliberately kept the brushwork rough. I didn't really smudge it, I just kept layering brush strokes over brush strokes because I wanted the surface to feel old, heavy, and slightly worn. There's something about that rough copper texture that works really well against the smooth iris petals. And once I had this heavy object in the back, I started thinking about the foreground. I wanted the opposite. Something light, something transparent. So I sketched in a tall glass and transparent teapot in the bowl. At first I really just outlined and loose shapes. The bowl eventually becomes this little ice cream moment with 2 scoops and an upside down cone. And the tall glass gets these tiny purple pieces at the bottom, plus a straw and a spoon. I didn't even think I need to completely explain what a drink is. Sometimes I like objects to feel familiar but still leave a little space for the viewer to imagine the flavor. The teapot changed quite a lot though. At the point I made it blue because I thought, okay, maybe the blue can connect with the background, but no, it just didn't feel right. So I slowly brought in warmer colors and then a little purple. And eventually I realized the teapot was starting to pick up colors from the the irises. That actually worked much better now the teapot and the bouquet quietly echo each other without looking identical. And you can still see the tea inside, so it keeps that transparent, delicate feeling I originally wanted. As the composition became fuller, I wanted stronger blocks of color, so I pushed the background into this dark red and muted blue combination. At this point, I honestly didn't know exactly what I was going to paint on them. I just knew I wanted the color to feel rich and slightly heavy. Then I added this vintage style table lamp in the back. I kept the decoration simple because the main thing I wanted from the lamp was warmth. And that soft yellow glow gives the left side of the painting another warm point against all the purple. And then I started thinking about balance. The right side already has flowers, candles, glass objects, and lots of overlapping shades. So the blue background gets these tiny simple flowers, white flowers, red flowers, just little blocks of color. You don't need complicated brushwork, they are background details. But on the red side, the foreground is visually quieter, so I thought, okay, this side can handle more. Butterflies, lots of them, different wing shapes, different colors, different sizes. I built them with layered colors and a little smudging, and I tried not to repeat exactly the same butterfly again and again. This is where the painting really starts moving toward maximalism for me. It's not just about adding more objects, it's about deciding where visual density can grow and where the eye still needs a little breathing room. Now, the flower vase was originally supposed to be another transparent object. The more I look at the red and blue backgrounds, the more I felt I needed one large earthy color block, something that could stand against those big background colors. So I changed the vase completely. It became clay vessel with handles. And once I had that clay surface, I immediately wanted to paint something on it. I started with a bonfire. Then I placed these tiny figures around the fire. At first I didn't know exactly who they were. I just worked out their poses. And a few figures gathering around the flames. So suddenly it started to look like some kind of gathering of ritual. And I followed the idea. I began giving these little figures more distinctive clothing and ceremonial details. Brown fur like outerwear, more feathers around their heads, and one figure seems to wear a bear skin. Another has a deer skull as a headpiece. So this is the part where the vase starts being just a decoration and starts carrying its own tiny story. And there's a whole gathering happening on the surface on this clay vessel. A fire is burning, the figures are standing around it, and then I painted the embers. Tiny orange and yellow sparks rising from the bonfire. At first they are still part of the painted scene on the pottery, but then I had this thought. What if they don't stop at the edge of the vase? So the sparks keep floating upward, higher and higher. They leave the clay vessel. They move into the bouquet. They enter the space where the cat is sitting.